What happened at a wedding that made it obvious that the bride and groom shouldn't be getting married? Are they still together? My sister-in-law got married last fall, and after the ceremony they got in an epic fight over the marriage certificate and didn't come to the reception until 2 hours after it started. A week later, they separated for a few weeks while trashing each other on Facebook. They're still together, and she's now pregnant. Edit. I also photographed this wedding, and it was the most stressful professional experience I've ever had. I forgot to mention too that the groom and groomsmen dropped a bunch of acid before the ceremony and continued into the reception. He freaked out, had a panic attack, and left. Dropping acid before your own wedding is a bold move. I bet that would be a horrible trip. I mean, everyone is already staring at you for the whole thing. That's unnerving enough. But to trip on top of that, I'd probably run away. They got married after a 10-year relationship. The wedding was painful to watch as they had such a bad fight the night before. They barely spoke to each other all day, hardly looked at each other. They split up 8 weeks later. I know 3 couples who were together for over 10 years before getting married, and none of them worked out. You'd think they'd have a good foundation in the relationship, but I guess getting married sets different expectations, and by that point, no one wants to change anymore. Maybe after such a long time the reason to get married might also be an attempt to save an already failing relationship. Or people succumb to familial and societal pressure. As in, after that long it's just the thing you're supposed to do. I've been with my partner almost 9 years, and when people find that out they assume we are married. When the priest equivalent said you may kiss the bride, she turned so that it would be a kiss on the cheek. Even as a child, that set off alarm bells. They have been divorced for a long time. I saw this like 2 weeks ago. They both work in healthcare, and I know the bride works as an IQ nurse, so she sees a lot of super sick people. And apparently they haven't been kissing each other at all for the last month. Like total contact precautions. It's sweet, and especially in the current pandemic makes perfect sense. But it looks weird. Now the weirder part was the toast made very deep into the open bar. One of the hospital coworkers said they hope they got corona because it's a 2-week quarantine that the hospital pays for. And fair enough, that's a fairly nice honeymoon. On their first dance, he kept trying to kiss her, and she would avoid it very subtly. I noticed that and thought, I don't think she loves him. I wasn't wrong. They divorced within the first year. I saw a video of the first dance like this. My brother-in-law taped it and said this couple is getting divorced. Not even 3 months later they were divorced. At a friend's wedding 2 years ago, the bride kept the bar open until 3 AM after the groom went home at 10 PM. She kept telling everyone that she is just with him because he has money and a flat. They are now going through a divorce after she cheated on him. 10 as old as time. Song as old as rhyme. Beauty and the Fleeced. Shortly after the ceremony, the groom announced to everyone, including his bride, my niece, that he had enlisted in the Navy and was due to report in a few weeks. She was beyond surprised. They didn't even make it a year. Made a life-altering decision without involving or even informing the spouse. Such a surprise it didn't work out. During the cake cutting, he smashed cake in her face. She immediately started crying and went to the bathroom for about 30 minutes. Then they got into a huge fight and barely spoke the rest of the night. Shockingly, they are still married, but they still fight all the time. She's my friend from college, so we keep in touch occasionally. She never has good things to say about him. My mama has always said it's pretty telling how a couple behaves during the cut of the cake. I've always paid attention to that, and she is right. The level of respect they have for each other shows up better at this moment than any other. I've noticed this, too. Especially if I've heard rumor of difficulties leading up to the wedding. Couples that I heard fought a lot seem to have aggression during the cake cutting. It's not always smushing equals fighting, but whether someone seems to be using it as an opportunity to embarrass the other person, or whether they're having fun. The groom drunkenly cornered my roommate and demanded a blowjob as a wedding gift. Apparently he was under the mistaken impression that all gay men are excited to give pretty much anyone a blowjob at any time. My roommate declined the invitation. Shockingly, that marriage did not last. This is one of the most wacky ones on here lol. Wacky? Well, there certainly was no sucky. We were good friends with a couple who fought all the time. She wanted to get married desperately and he was indifferent. After years of nagging he finally proposed. On the day of the wedding, right before he walked out, he looked at us and sighed, well, maybe now she will stop nagging at me and finally be fucking happy. They're now divorced. She cheated on him with some guy she used to date. Why fight with him to marry her only to then cheat and get divorced? What a complete waste of time for both of them. And money. Wedding was $15K. The bride got so drunk that the bar cut her and everyone else off. The groom was also drunk. People started leaving at midnight and the bride got mad and yelled about how they were all ruining her wedding because she wanted to dance and drink more. I was their designated driver to get them to their hotel. The entire drive there, they fought. She berated him. He cried. That was a long 20-minute drive. I could have scrubbed vomit out with cleaners. But the awkwardness has stained that car forever. They've been together 7 years. Their daughter, born 9 months after the wedding, is adorable. ///_/ So I figure from reading this thread that couples having fight during weddings either mean divorce in 6 months or married for a long ass time. Hey, my wife and I fight pretty frequently. We just make sure that they are productive and that everyone feels better at the end. Fighting isn't inherently unhealthy. He was caught doing coke in the car before the wedding started. The bride was pregnant at the time. Fear still married. Fight constantly and now want another baby. They don't call it a white wedding for nothing. My good friend was marrying this guy. We will call him Ned. Ned definitely had a drinking problem that everyone swept under the rug. He promised my friend he would keep it under wraps for the wedding. He made it down the aisle, but by the reception he was binge drinking. By then end of the night the groom Ned completely disappeared. No one could find him. A few nervous laughs turned into mild panic when the lights were turned on in an effort to find him. My husband decided to go look for him in the parking lot where he finds Ned on his lips in the dirt. He had smoked a joint and got the spins. My husband tried to talk sense into him, reminding him this is your wedding dude. He got Ned to come inside and did the most cringy walk of shame past the bride's family, who was very cross with him. Ned was supposed to drive them 11 miles from the venue to their hotel in bride's grandfather's vintage Corvette. He was too drunk to drive, so the bride's grandfather drove them and the bride had to sit on the middle armrest with no seatbelts. Grandpa drops them at the hotel. Bride barely gets groom up to the room, where he passes out on the bed. Bride had to wander the halls looking for someone to help her out of her wedding dress, since her groom was passed out drunk. The word annulment was definitely floating around that next morning. As crushed as the bride was, she stuck it out. 3 years later they are now separated and divorcing because he is still a drunk. Oh man, that brings back memories. My friend's wedding had a hotel nearby, so most of us stayed there rather than drive home. Get a call after the party while settling into the room. Hey, it's me, bride. Can you come up here? Hurry. I immediately go into panic mode. Grab some cash and keys thinking I needed to make a getaway with the bride. I get there and she's like, can you help get my dress off the buttons? Are too small for hubby. And she hands me this hook thing. WTF, who thought this was a good idea? 10 minutes of frantically unbuttoning while groom is pouring champagne, lighting candles. Wedding dress designers, zips, velcro. Literally anything besides tiny buttons that require a neurosurgeon, steady hands and an extremely sober person. Bride got drunk and started screaming about how much she hated her in-laws, who were obviously within earshot. They lasted a few years, had kids, and unfortunately are spending thousands in a nasty divorce right now. Man, this sucks. I hate my in-laws too, but I'm always nice to them. About an hour before my cousin's wedding she made the comment that her next wedding wasn't going to be as big and complicated. She was right, her second wedding was super small. Edit. Totally forgot the possessive s. Oops. Holy shit. I came here to post something similar. I was a bridesmaid in a wedding where the bride was planning her next wedding in the car on the way to the wedding. Everyone was completely silent before her maid of honor said, "Let's just get through this one." Edited to update. The couple lasted 3 years. That entire scenario, especially the maid of honor's brush off, could be a beautifully hilarious scene in an awesome dark comedy. My brother's wedding. It was super uncomfortable and awkward during their engagement. My parents kept asking him if he was sure. He said yes. Then came the wedding. Super small. When they said to kiss, they both went in for a peck. But she turned her face at the last minute, so he kissed her cheek. My husband yelled for them to do it again. I was also their wedding photographer and he knew I didn't get a good shot. The marriage only got weirder and worse from there. They acted like they were on an awkward first date every day. Finally, a year later they divorced. Did they not even like one another at all? Turns out, no. Part of me think they both wanted to get married to someone, just not each other. While getting up the stairs, the groom stepped on the bride's gown. She turned and slapped him and called him blind. He turned the other way and left. Oof, good for him. Well, no, maybe he was actually blind and just went the wrong way, lol. As a blind person, this is something I will now joke about. Just like I'll sometimes come into the office and casually say hi to the window, because I did that on my first day of work, thinking someone sat next to me. Husband disappeared 2 hours into a 6-hour reception because he was bored. Just went into the house and hung out on his phone. It was a chill ranch thing with games and drinking and dancing. Adults only. Also, I didn't meet him until the wedding while me and the bride, hung out pretty frequently. So there was some lead up to that, didn't help. He wasn't cheating. Just watching golf videos. Edit. Also, they lasted less than 2 months. Second edit for clarity, they didn't divorce because of that. Dude 180D, as soon as the ring was on, going golfing every night for hours with different groups of people. She asked him to limit it to a couple times a week. She suggested therapy. He blew her off. She got out and is much happier. The wedding was semi-destination. 6 hours away. His friends drove out there and he ditched them too. The reception was more bonfire way with free booze and yard games. Stuff both of them had done before with his friends. He bounced right after the obligatory wedding stuff when we finally got to do fun things. I could try and psychoanalyze what he was thinking, but who knows? Probably some kind of regret. The dude doesn't get to decide what's boring if he went home to watch videos of golf. The groom had his car stolen on the morning of the wedding and spent the whole day swearing and punching inanimate objects because, as we all heard 1,000 times that day, not only was it the most important thing in his life, it also wasn't insured. The wedding was at a Boy Scout hall, for no apparent reason. And the reception was in the cafeteria at one of those underwater world places with the glass tunnel. But no one was allowed to go see the fish because, get this, the whole day had a Lion King theme. Then towards the end of the night the bride beat one of the bridesmaids half to death because she caught her fucking a groomsman who she tearfully admonished for cheating on her. I have no idea how long the marriage lasted for. I never saw or heard from them again. One of those underwater world places with the glass tunnel. But no one was allowed to go see the fish because, get this, the whole day had a Lion King theme. This is one of the most insane things in the entire thread. Having a reception in an aquarium is weird enough. Having a Lion King themed wedding is just beyond comprehension. Combining the two and forbidding people to look at the fish is frighteningly crazy. I got married in an aquarium. And it was awesome. Said our vows in front of the shark tank. But it was now aquarium themed. Nobody look at the fish, think about lions. The bride and groom both got coked up and got into some kind of argument over the bride wanting him to help her undo her dress. It ended with the groom beating the bride beyond recognition and being arrested. He was charged and given a restraining order and their marriage lasted 1 day. See, I'm always curious about this. Would this outright annul the marriage? I'd think so, but I don't know a lot about marriage law. Not so much evidence that they shouldn't have been together, but evidence that Maisel is just a horrible, thoughtless person. The wedding was supposed to start at 3 p.m. At 3, she was getting in a bathtub in her hotel room to unwind before starting to get ready. All of us bridesmaids were already ready. I had to call my mom and tell her that we were at least an hour out. My brother was there waiting already. Oh, and it was October, Halloween. Around 40f and windy. And it was an outdoor wedding in a park with no indoor venue attached. Their poor guests ended up waiting more than an hour and a half. The divorce papers have been filed and should be final within a few months. Just the idea of being in the bath when my wedding is supposed to be starting gives me anxiety. I can't imagine how anyone could unwind in that scenario. What about her hair and makeup? That alone would take at least an hour. I don't know how she found that unwinding. Is it right? I mean, I'm personally super guilty when I'm 5 minutes late for a casual party with friends. When we said start at 8 or so. Come whenever you can. I already feel so bad being late to something no one cares. If I'm on time, I would find it too stressful to handle being that late to my own wedding. A wedding guest looking out of the window beamed at the groom waiting at the altar and said she's here, and the groom jokingly pretended to run away. It went down like a lead balloon because he had actually run away the previous year. Literally went out to the shops and didn't come back for 8 weeks while she was pregnant with their first child. The bride's mother gave him a look that would have wilted the wedding flowers, and happy chatter in the room turned to frosty silence just in time for the entrance of the bride. They are still together many years later and have had more children together, but I wouldn't describe them as happily married. The way you described the bride's mother's face was fantastic, lol. Bride's father ran away with groom's mother on the day of their wedding. Haven't people ever heard of closing the goddamn door? No. It's much better to face these kinds of things with a sense of poised rationality. Fuck it, pour the champagne. Pour the champagne. He was so hammered he could barely stand for his vows, and they got in a huge fight at the reception. Lasted less than a year. The wedding was fake. Bride and groom were quite young and dated happily for several months. Bride was in a hurry to settle down, I think to fit in with our friendship group who had or were doing the same, and pushed for engagement. And groom was reasonably happy to oblige, but not ready to take the next step and wanted a long engagement. Bride began pushing to set wedding dates almost immediately. Groom's mother and father were unwell with both physical and mental health issues. Getting closer to the wedding date, groom made it known that he loved bride but wasn't ready to settle down yet. Bride wasn't having any of it and complained to her own immediate family about this, who start harassing groom's parents about how he's a dog, mistreating their daughter, etc. Groom agrees to go ahead with the wedding if bride's family leave his parents alone. Wife wasn't happy with this and called the celebrant to talk some sense into him. Celebrant refused to perform a wedding where one party wasn't on board. Bride insisted the event go ahead and that they pretended was real, but with a bunch of guests who had been married or attended weddings recently. We all immediately noticed the celebrant didn't say the words legally required for marriage. Edit. In Australia. Evidently this isn't a requirement elsewhere. Closed bracket comma. And no paperwork was signed. Groom's parents refused to attend the reception, leaving table 1 half empty and not paying for the bar service. Guests took back their gifts. Bride and groom avoided each other the entire time except for a super awkward first dance. The whole thing was super surreal and awkward. They split up a couple of months later. She cared more about having a wedding than a marriage. Sad. My mom worked with a girl who was engaged and was constantly talking about every detail of planning the wedding. My mom said, "It's like she doesn't realize that the wedding is only 5 hours and the marriage is supposed to be the rest of your life." Apostrophe. She was barely around during the reception and no one could find the bride. 2 weeks later she was already cheating on her husband. They were divorced in less than a year. Ouch. Worked as a cook for a 4-year, in advance booked wedding spot. I would prep 4 days, work 1 wedding, and have my days off. My weddings were Saturdays. I'd never see the ceremony, often off-site. if on site. I was busy. So this one wedding / people complained about the sun reflecting off the water. They booked the time and place themselves. Refusal help. But blamed us for not having a sun shield of some sort. Had 100 more people there than planned. Party. And we ran out of food. 40 and 140 are two different beasts. / begins to turn to a coke party. 30 seconds after the food. Like. Everyone went to their cars and the washrooms. I mean 100 people at once. Bride and groom. Their parents. / strung up. The poor DJ got his work in. Bride would come in and grab his wrists, telling him to change songs every 45 seconds. Play this now. Now this. / people started whispering a bunch. Like. Everywhere. There was something up. / more coke / more whispers. The security guy comes up to me and tells me the new husband is passed out in his car. Dead drunk. Car is running. / new wife is now loose and fucks someone. It is unknown who. Not husband. Behind out garbage cans. You're in the wrong thread. We're talking about disaster weddings here. Not best weddings ever. Bride kept telling anyone who'd listen that she booked the wedding through Groupon and it was super cheap. They hadn't planned to get married until she saw the deal online. Not sure how long it lasted, but she posted a sarcastic comment about how successful her marriage was on Facebook on her first anniversary using the memories feature. Don't get me wrong. I love a coupon. But the most important decision I would make, because I got a bargain, is what to eat for dinner. Didn't know them personally, but there was a story in my town of the bride walking in on the groom sexually assaulting the maid of honor at the wedding. And they went through with the wedding anyway. Then said bride was the maid of honor at her maid of honor's wedding a week or two later. And I think it was sometime after this that the maid of honor reported the assault. I think this wins the most fucked up prize in this thread. Well. At her bachelorette party she broke down, drunk, and told us that she knew she shouldn't marry him and that she knew it wouldn't work. We begged her not to go through with it, but she did. On the day of the wedding, his uncle pulled him aside and said you don't have to do this, while counting out $100 bills. The wedding was delayed due to a storm. This caused the bride to get angry and snap at everyone who even tried to talk to her. Finally the storm let up and the wedding took place. Mid-reception the bride and grilly stormed out of the reception. And that kind broke up the festivities. No, they are not still married. She started cheating on her husband less than a year in, and they divorced shortly thereafter. This was 15 to 16 years ago. He remarried a year or so later, and is still married to that woman. She just finished up her second divorce. I haven't talked to her in years because, well, she's a really toxic person who does not see how her actions contribute directly to her misery, and I no longer live in our tiny hometown. So I don't have to be friends with shitty people I don't like that much anyway. I love the uncle trying to bribe him not to do it. I just imagine him looking like Mitchell Corleone with a couple of heavies behind him. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.